I'm Tim.
I'm Corinne.
And we may not be particularly short in stature or tall in power, but we are narrow in purpose and wide of vision, and today we're turning that vision upon a very fun flick from the glorious 1980s, Krull.
On a distant planet, a great kingdom was ravaged by beings who came from the future to conquer the universe. Now, the only survivors follow a doubtful seer and a throneless king.
They will hold her in the Black Fortress. You must have help.
Thieves, bandits, fighters and brawlers.
Desperate men. Those are the kind of men I need.
Well, you heard him. We are now an army.
At the end of an impossible journey, they must fight an invincible enemy. Columbia Pictures presents a world apart from anything you have seen before. Krull.
The planet Krull is under threat from the power of the Beast, who lands his menacing fortress there and sends forth his legions of slayers to kidnap Princess Lissa on the very day she's to be married to Prince Colwyn. With his family slaughtered during the attack, the newly made king sets out on a quest to rescue her, with the help of the wise and patient Ynir, tetchy sorcerer Urgo the Magnificent, a band of thieves led by the roguish Torquil, and the gentle but dangerous Cyclops Rel. As Lissa fends off the Beast's advances, the band faces strange enemies and dangers as they struggle to find and infiltrate the constantly shifting fortress. Okay, so, how did you first encounter this particular one?
It's another one of those movies I don't remember the first time I saw it because it really far back when I was a kid. This came out in 83, so I probably encountered it around 84 when it came out on VHS or played on HBO, so I could have been about 6.
Yeah, for me it's one of those ones, I always just remember it being around. I especially remember seeing behind-the-scenes stuff before actually seeing the movie and seeing the spider web scene or the fortress or the slayers and going, oh, I've got to see that. And then I think my dad rented it for all of us to watch it one afternoon and finally got to check it out and just grew up with the bizarre, crazy set pieces that this movie has. All right, a little basic information. It was released July 29th, 1983. It opened against Private School and the original National Lampoon's Vacation. The budget was anywhere between $45 and $50 million, and I gotta say, it shows up on the screen. I mean, it definitely looks like they spent a lot, especially on the sets. For box office, though, it only took in $16.5 million. Right now, it only has about 33% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 55% audience score, so...
That is a damn shame.
Yeah, surprisingly not a very well-reviewed movie, although it also might have been just the saturation of these type of fantasy movies coming out around that time. There were a lot of them.
They were definitely trying to capitalize on Star Wars with this film, which I know we'll talk about more.
Yeah, you can definitely feel it in pretty much every creative decision. There's a little bit of that behind it. Let's talk about the cast and characters. First of all, we have Ken Marshall as Colwyn. Marshall had previously appeared on TV in the title role in the Marco Polo TV series, and of course later on he'd go on to play Lieutenant Commander Eddington on Deep Space Nine. And kind of wish he had gone on to more, because I really like him in this lead role.
Every time I've seen this film, I assumed that Liam Neeson was Ken Marshall, and every time I saw Ken Marshall as the headliner of the movie, I realized, oh yeah, that isn't Liam Neeson. How is this guy not working? He doesn't seem to necessarily, in this movie anyway, have the chops to do it, but it's an early film, and I find it's pretty rare for someone to become a megastar when one of the first movies they've done, one of the first widely released movies they've done, has had a bit part.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising to see the lead actor go on to pretty much nothing, and then a couple of the bit part actors go on to bigger stuff. But Marshall kind of has this Errol Flynn quality that he brings to the part that I really, really like. I mean, let's face it, script-wise, there's really not much to the character there.
No.
But he brings a lot of charisma that keeps you invested in him and makes him likable enough that you want to root for him. They start off with this plot arc of him as this untested king. Like, he's lost his dad, he's lost his whole kingdom, he's lost his wife, and he starts
out as a whiny brat.
Yeah, it's, again, kind of the Luke Skywalker quality to him, that he needs mentorship, he needs to be seasoned and to grow into this king. But that kind of vanishes midway through the movie. Once he meets the other characters, they don't really do much with that.
Yeah, it seems like they abandoned his character development, like you said, around the time the movie ignored Star Wars for a few minutes and became Robin Hood.
Yeah, it's like once he can actually bring other guys to his side, it feels like, all right, that's all the development we really need in showing him kind of getting his kingly qualities. He's ready to lead from there on.
So the scene that we're referring to is when he meets this band of thieves who were going to molest them in the forest. And he convinces them to come along on this journey for not fame and fortune, but for the freedom of their children.
Would you follow a king to the Black Fortress? Now I know you're a lunatic. I wouldn't follow my own father to the Black Fortress.
If he could find it.
Not that he'd be foolish enough to do such a thing.
Is it foolish to defend your world? And to fight for your homes and families? If the invader is conquered, you'll be slaves with the rest of us.
Noble sentiments, but we fight for profit. You know what I mean?
For the prophet's freedom. And fame.
Yeah, and it's not really a quality we've seen from the character at that point, this kind of leadership oration.
Not
It
at
seems
all.
to come out of nowhere, but I did like that Marshall did a lot of his own stunts. Apparently he studied fencing in college, and you can see it in a lot of the sword fight scenes. He's doing a lot of that. He even supposedly did that roll down the stairs during the opening attack scene, which looked really painful.
It did look painful.
He did not do a lot of the climbing, though.
No, they had someone. They had hired one specific person to do all the climbing in this movie, and there was quite a bit of climbing.
There is. It's anytime there's a close-up and it's like, him from the hip up and you can actually see it's him, he's on like a platform going, trying to climb up that mountain face and make it look difficult. I also got to give Marshall extra points because he's a big fan of the John Carter books, and apparently that's part of what he wanted to bring to the role, so good on him.
He definitely did.
Next we have Lisette Anthony as Lissa, although for the role dubbed by American actress Lindsay Krause. We'll get into that in a second.
I'm sure Lindsay Krause is a wonderful actor in her own right, but dubbing over somebody is very difficult, and it just was not done well. I don't think her as the voice of Lisette worked. It didn't mesh well with Lisette's appearance.
Yeah, I definitely agree. She was really not a fan of that because she felt the American voice took a lot of the naivete away from the character that she wanted. And you can see in her physical performance, in the opening scene, the way she peeks over the railing waiting for Colin to show up, or just her movements seem like something of a teenage girl would kind of, the way she would move.
The voiceover is very mature.
Yes.
It's definitely the voice of at least a 25, 30-year-old, I would say 30.
I guess it came about because the president of Columbia Pictures felt that if they had what appeared to be Americans in the two lead roles, it would bring in audiences better. As for Anthony herself, she also appeared in the comedy Switch, The Advocate, and Mel Brooks' Dracula Dead and Loving It, as well as the revamp of Dark Shadows. And she took on the Karen Black part when they did Trilogy of Terror 2. You also might recognize her from a couple of Bryan Adams music videos. The ones for Summer of '69 and Run to You. Anthony apparently was very lonely on the set because she spent most of her time on the film acting to blue screens and just random noises off set, not a lot of the other actors.
She did spend a lot, within the first 15 minutes of the film, because I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was very, very quick. She was kidnapped and brought into the lair of the beast. And it's obvious that the whole thing is just empty screens and blue screens and empty sets.
It's like she runs down this corridor.
She runs a lot.
She runs down this corridor, yeah.
She does a lot of running, in which, when I was a kid, I didn't understand why she was running around. And seeing it again now, I realized, she was trying to escape. Like, that should have made sense, but didn't. So I feel like something was missing. She wasn't given the proper direction as an actor. Her blocking was wrong.
Yeah.
There was just something really weird about just running around. She was gliding. She wasn't just that she was running, she was gliding with her giant wedding gown held out on each side like a delicate princess.
Yeah, she looks less like somebody who's running for her life and somebody who's trying to move away from somebody annoying at a party.
Yeah, if you know the scene I'm talking about, the moment when Cinderella runs away from the prince at midnight, that's how Lissa ran through the entire film.
As to her character, she doesn't really get much to do. I mean, we see a lot of her helping to arm the male characters, like the guards in the castle. It's like, here's a sword. I'll just kind of stand here and not attack the creature from the back, which might have saved your life.
She has 4 contributions to this entire film. She exists to fulfill her side of the prophecy, which we'll get into the prophecy. She hands a sword to a guy who is trying to protect her, who ends up dead anyway. Meanwhile, she's holding a sword and doesn't do a damn thing. She hands the fire to her now husband at the end of the film, and I can't remember, actually. I know she had 4, but...
Well, the only other one I'd say, and I think probably her best scene, is when she's having that verbal duel with the Beast about...
But that's not even... I mean, the Beast really could have just been talking to a lamp. You know?
At least it's something for her character. It's her sticking up for herself for once, which she doesn't really do for much of the rest of the movie.
She stood up to her father. In fact, when we meet her in the very beginning, she's much more mature than the Colin that we meet in the beginning. I would say her upbringing maybe was setting her up for her kingdom.
That's true. And also, it seems like she's kind of the architect of this alliance that they're trying to put together, too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I see no reason for an alliance with our ancient enemies.
Father, the invaders are destroying our world. We must have the alliance. Only if we're united do we stand a chance against them.
Then I'll make a treaty with King Thorold. It's not necessary for you to marry his son.
It's the only way to guarantee the alliance. The marriage is my choice.
She's got diplomatic skills, which sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, we'll
A
get into
princess
that
who
too.
is kidnapped who has diplomatic skills.
Next we have Freddie Jones as, I always got to remember how to pronounce it, Ynir. The old one, or at least the middle-aged one.
Who comes down from Granite Mountain to help usher forth the prophecy, of which he himself has been given. He's been given this knowledge.
It is given him to know.
It is given him to know.
And to deliver exposition every once in a while, like,
Yes.
This is who this is. This is where we're going to go now. Oh, that didn't work. We'll go this way.
He's also somehow our narrator.
And he's a very grumpy mentor. I mean, most of the first part of his role seems to be to kind of knock down Colin, like, you can be nicer, you know. Don't throw that yet. You're not ready for it yet.
Yeah, it's kind of chipping away at his boyishness and cockiness. You know, like, don't get cocky, kid.
I do like that we get little bits of his motivation early, like, oh yes, I loved once long ago, and you kind of assume that's going to be it until later on with the scene with the Widow of the Web, we finally understand why he's helping Colin, that he kind of looks at him and sees himself when he was young. And this idea of, I screwed this up when I was his age, I'm going to make sure he doesn't screw this up, that he actually gets his chance with her. I think it's kind of nice that they wait pretty much 3/4 of the movie to give us that motivation. They tease that out a little bit more than you normally would see.
There's a young girl being held in the fortress. A young girl with your name. A young man seeks her. A young man. The age I was when you and I met. When you and I loved.
I'm just surprised they didn't throw it in when he first mentions it, that I knew this person once, and leaving it as this kind of cloud hovering over the movie that, he's eventually going to have to confront her. But instead, I like that they wait.
Yeah.
As for the actor, Jones appeared on the soap opera Emmerdale, and you probably recognize him from a lot of David Lynch movies. He was the Krull ringmaster in The Elephant Man. In fact, it's hard for me to look at him in this movie and not think, you bastard. And Thufir Hawat in Dune, of course. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, doesn't have the crazy eyebrows this time around. I also remember him as Chester Cragwitch from Young Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Wanless from Firestarter. And he was a voice in The Black Cauldron as well.
Which one?
He was Dalbet.
I don't remember.
It's been so long since I've seen it, I don't remember either. Oh, and he was in Cold Comfort Farm as well. He actually played the lead in The Dresser on stage, too. And when the director of this movie, Peter Yates, made the movie, he figured he'd be cast, but unfortunately Albert Finney got the part instead. And Yates kind of assumed that Jones never really quite forgave him for that. Next we have comedian David Batley as Ergo the Magnificent of the Hill People. Batley was a comic actor who appeared on The Bill and on Mr. Bean, and he was Eric Idle's comic partner for a while on Rutland Television Weekend. In fact, he was in the original sketch for The Ruddles, the Beatles spoof that he later made a movie of. But most people know him as the impatient teacher from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes.
Struggling to teach them percentages.
He's just as wonderful as the frustrated teacher in this movie.
Yeah, I love that he's this tetchy, puffed-up, complete idiot. But over the course of the movie, I think, more than other characters, he actually has a really good arc.
I don't really think a lot of this was internal changes for him. I think it was more revealing his true self, that he does have heart and he's very caring and he can consider friends, because you get the sense that this guy's been picked on a lot in his life. So he's resorted to this bravado that he can't sustain through his journey.
Well, I think it's really interestingly illustrated with his relationship with Titch, the little kid.
Yes.
Who, at first, when they meet, it seems like Ergo thinks, finally, this is somebody I can impress with my bluster.
I am Ergo the Magnificent. Short in stature, tall in power, narrow of purpose and wide of vision.
That is very impressive.
I should hope so.
I'm Titch.
That's not impressive, but adequate.
But once Titch's foster parent there, the blind seer, dies, you can see how Ergo's relationship with him starts to change. In the swamp, you see him walking alongside him, less kind of animated and boasting, but more quiet. Or that great little thing he does where he debases himself to turn into a puppy and be manhandled by this kid for quite a while.
He's the only person in that group of ignorant adults who recognizes that this boy is a child who's lost his guardian, and the only person he knows in that group. He doesn't know any of these men beyond, hey, my seer hung out with them for a few days. I think going deeper into the Ergo character, I think Ergo could have seen a lot of the kid in himself, alone in the world, needing somebody, and he just became his family.
And his protector, especially in the second half where he turns into a tiger and keeps him safe from the slayers.
Which is something we don't see him do until that moment. All of his magic up until then has been to escape.
And also, it's never really quite worked well. He turns the wrong people into an animal or something like that.
Yeah.
This and the puppy thing are the only ones he actually gets right.
Yeah.
Next we have Alan Armstrong as Torquil, the bandit leader. He's another familiar face. You've probably seen him in the original Get Carter with Michael Caine. He also popped up in Patriot Games, Black Beauty, Braveheart, The Mummy Returns, and Aragon. And he has little parts in Sleepy Hollow and Millions. And now he's appearing on Penny Dreadful, that Showtime TV series.
Yeah.
In Arthurian terms, well, Torquil kind of has two roles to play. He's sort of the Han Solo of the group, in that he's the charming rogue. And I also see a little bit of Lancelot from King Arthur in him.
Yeah.
Especially the way he meets Colwyn, this idea that he meets him in a confrontation, and then eventually grows to respect this guy and decides he's going to follow him.
He's also got Little John.
That's true, yeah.
That's exactly the way that Little John meets Robin Hood.
That's a good point, yeah. And I like that while he is this criminal rogue, there's kind of a sense of honor to him, too. That he does have concern over his sons, and when he has the chance to get his manacles off, he's like, no.
Only the King and the Lord Marshal have the keys to these manacles. You don't look like a Lord Marshal.
No.
Look about the right age to be Turtle's son, eh?
Exact age.
Yeah, Torquil, you're growing old, your brain's softening.
9 men like you are worth an army.
If we succeed, unlock them. Otherwise, I'll die with them. Well, you heard him. We are now an army.
He wants to earn that freedom rather than have it given to him.
Yeah, he wants to prove himself and kind of redeem his name through what they're going to do on this quest. And we come to my favorite, Bernard Bresslaw as Rel the Cyclops. Bresslaw is probably known for his comedy work in the Carry On movies, and also, one of my favorite bits of his, he was one of the first Ice Warriors we see in Doctor Who in the 60s.
Oh, very nice.
And he was the tallest one, too. He was 6'7". He also popped up in the sci-fi western Moon 02, One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing, and Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones' Jabberwocky. And he almost played the part of the creature in the Hammer movie Curse of Frankenstein before Christopher Lee got the part.
Almost is not quite close enough.
No, but I can imagine with his height he would have been amazing in that
Yes.
part. Rel's the kind of character I love in that you look at him and you think he's a monster because he's, well, kind of unsettling looking with that one big staring eye. And yet he's got this nobility and this grace to him that the human characters don't quite have. Just in the way he moves, this kind of dignified way he walks, although part of that might have been the fact that Bresslaw probably couldn't see very much out of that makeup and was trying not to hit stuff.
I think it does work for the character, even if it hadn't been a choice. It worked very well.
I also like that, given once we find out about the backstory of his people, that they were betrayed by the beast.
Long ago, his ancestors lived in a world far from Krull and had 2 eyes like other men. Then they made a bargain with the beast, who was the leader of the Slayers. They gave up one of their eyes in exchange for the power to see into the future, but they were cheated. And the only future they are permitted to see is the time of their own death. They're sad, solitary creatures, born to know the day they will die.
We get the sense that this rather sad ability to just know when you're going to die is isolate his people, and yet he's got this kindness and this worldliness to him that he might have been very bitter from what happened to him and his people, but I like that he's not.
It doesn't seem like a bitterness, and you're definitely right, it's not, but it seems more like, okay, well, I have to make up for what my people have done. He has no reason to go on this journey with these people except that he can see when he's going to die, so he has to follow that path. But he did not have to actually help these people. He seemed to be doing it out of a sense of duty or as a way to pay back a little of what his people had done.
Well, there's a couple other things. Ynir implies that there's an animosity between his people and the Slayers after what happened, but also I get the sense that he sees in these people who are being oppressed by the same enemy kind of a kinship.
Yeah.
You've been with us for a long way now.
Since the beginning. When I learned that the Old One had come down, I knew that the time had come.
Join us then. All men need company.
Yes. All men.
Next we come to the big man himself, Liam Neeson as Keegan. Of course, before this he appeared in another Arthurian-style story as Gawain in Excalibur.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of went on to a few things after this. But
one or two.
It's funny to look at like the DVD case for this now, where he has this big picture on there of him holding the axe, being the hero, and
he doesn't do much in this film.
Not really.
He has a wife nearby where they are staying at one point in the movie.
One of several, we're told.
One of several of his wives, but this one wife makes sure that the party is fed. And the other thing he does is die.
Although he does die pushing, I think it's Corinne out of the way of a blast, so he does get one moment of heroism at least.
I think that was a token.
My traveling days are over, my friend.
No, we'll get you out of here.
No, here's where I stay.
This guy might be popular later. We'll give him something to do. Also, not really getting much to do, but being notable is Robbie Coltrane as Rune.
I cannot tell you what he did in that movie besides be Robbie Coltrane.
He kind of complained about the fact they weren't being paid.
At the very beginning of the group getting together with Colwyn.
I think he stabbed something once, and he got shot and died.
So, the moral of this story, if you're going to be in a cheesy sci-fi fantasy movie, make sure your part consists of doing much of nothing and then dying. It'll lead to stardom.
You'll go on to greater glory, yeah. I've read, I'm not sure if this is true, that he was actually dubbed in the movie by another actor. I can't tell because it sounds a lot like his voice.
It did sound a lot like him. In fact, I thought I heard the accent. So it's possible that they were sloppy in the dubbing and missed a part or two.
That could be.
Not that he has much of a speaking role.
No, he maybe has a dozen lines throughout the whole movie.
Right.
But. And next we have Trevor Martin as the voice of the Beast. He went uncredited. Martin also has a Doctor Who connection. He was one of the Time Lords in the last episode of the War Games. And he actually played the Doctor himself in one of the spin-off stage plays, as well as appearing on Call the Midwife, The Bill, and Coronation Street. And let's talk about the Beast, the big antagonist.
Oh, the Beast. As far as villains go, I'm not impressed.
I'm a little disappointed because midway through the movie he kind of gets interesting, where he has this kind of back and forth with Lyssa, but by the finale he's just a big monster again. He doesn't speak anymore. I really want to see his confrontation with Colwyn, him trying to shake Colwyn's confidence in what he can do, that he is this weak prince that could never defeat this giant thing, but instead he just kind of roars and spits fireballs at him.
There definitely was not enough interaction between Colwyn and the Beast. In fact, there wasn't enough interaction between Lyssa and the Beast. I think I would just liken him to Bowser in that he kidnaps the princess and then he appears at the end of the game for a boss fight.
I would have preferred that he'd be a little bit more like Darkness in Legend. This idea that he's trying to seduce her with... And we see a little of that when he turns into Colwyn, but he's...
But there's no seduction there. She's instantly repulsed.
Do not let my form frighten you, Lyssa. I could assume any form I wish. Any form you wish.
There's no love in that form.
And you think there's love in your boy, King?
It doesn't help that he still has the big, glowing, creepy eyes.
Yeah, for him, it was more about force. Like, he's not going to seduce her, but he's still The prophecy is bizarre, and we have to talk about the prophecy if we can talk further about the beast. The prophecy states basically
that a girl of ancient name shall become queen, that she shall choose a king, and that together they shall rule our world, and that their son shall rule the galaxy.
In order for marriage, or this marriage, I don't know if it's typical of marriage in Krull, but in order for it to take place, Colwyn has to put a fire into water. Lissa has to take the fire out of the water and then hand it back to Colwyn. This is as weird as it sounds, but it is very obvious choice that she has to make. She chooses the man, she takes the fire from the water, she gives it to the man. The beast wants her to do this. He wants to be the person, or, the thing that she marries because she is the girl of ancient name. And I guess he wants to rule Krull. His son would be the one conquering the galaxy, so I don't even know how much of that he cares about. But it's still a choice. There has to be some sort of seduction, and he just doesn't. There's just blunt, brutal, blundering.
He does in a way, but he does it in completely the wrong way. He tries to seduce her with power, saying, look at this throne, look at all this stuff, we'll rule the galaxy.
You have chosen a paltry kingdom on an insignificant planet.
And love.
Love is fleeting. Power is eternal. Such is my power. It can be yours.
I don't want your power.
It's almost the Darth Vader speech to Luke.
Exactly.
We'll rule the galaxy as husband and wife. And he doesn't get that she's not interested in that at all. That holds no appeal for her.
Yeah.
Hence their whole debate about power and love, which one conquers all. I also realized that prophecy kind of reduces Lissa even more. Instead of being this person, now she's just this pathway to power for these different characters.
But the thing is, she is this ancient name. That's all she is.
The last one we have to discuss is Francesca Annis as the Widow of the Web. She appeared in the Roman Polanski Macbeth movie, as well as Madame Bovary, and of course Lady Jessica in Dune with Freddie Jones again, so that scene was a nice little reunion for those two actors.
The Widow of the Web is a wonderful character that didn't get fleshed out enough. I think that her backstory, how she became the Widow of the Web, was just brushed over very quickly. It was just like, oh yeah, I did this thing and this is my punishment. Who did the punishing? Why is she there? Did she punish herself?
That was the vibe I got, that it was
yes.
self-imposed exile. And being that Medea was one of my favorite plays, I did kind of love that little sense of, this is Medea after the events of that story. She's killed her child, and this is what happens to her. She exiles herself into a giant spider web. But it is a problem that Ynir kind of like brushes this aside, like, oh, you kill her son? I forgive you, it's fine.
There's a lot of logic that's lost in that scene, as lovely as it is, and as much as I adore that scene and the idea of the time of her life being sand, and, I mean, how does she get into the center of the web without the spider eating her? Just to start with.
I guess, well, the spider seems to be afraid of sand, so she walks in with hourglass and goes, I got this. Clear a path.
I have this sand.
Yeah. I do love the moment where, at first it would seem superficial, that she helps him because she gets to see herself as she was, not this old crone, but the young woman she was. But I do love this sense that he's given her, just by reaffirming how much he loved her then, giving her this glimpse of the person she was before she did this terrible act. And lets her remember what they had and the person she used to be.
You can never forgive a woman who has killed your son.
If I had not, could I see you now as I saw you then?
And allow me to see through your eyes.
Could I have left you?
Your vision is your gift to me.
I thought that was a really nice little moment that, again, because it's just this tiny little slice of the movie, has to go by in like 30 seconds.
But those are our two females in the movie. We've got Lissa 1, the princess who is young right now, and Lissa 2, the widow of the web. We have two female characters in this entire movie. They are both named Lissa. So many problems with that.
And they're both mostly there to help their male counterpart, their boyfriend, basically move the plot along.
Yes. So, going back to the prophecy, it's a girl of an ancient name whose name is Lissa. Now, there are two female characters in this movie, and they're both named Lissa. So, a girl of an ancient name shall choose a king, and together they will rule Krull. Let's just start with that part of it. So, we've got the older Lissa, and we've got Ynir. Lissa, of course, has an ancient name. I am pretty convinced that they were married at one point. So we've already got one part of the prophecy set up. And then the rest of the prophecy says their son will conquer the galaxy. Lissa and Ynir do have a son.
And I loved you, Lissa, with all my heart.
But you would not stay with me.
There were responsibilities, duty,
ambition. You had a son. We had a son.
But you said nothing. Where is he?
I killed him when he was born. And this is my punishment.
So they fulfilled the prophecy up until Lissa, meaning the widow of the web, killed their child. What isn't revealed enough, in my opinion, with Ynir is he left her. Supposedly he had some kind of duty or responsibility. We never find out. It's kind of important, but we never find out. So that's the first part of it. The second part, of course, is that there is now the young Lissa and Colwyn. And of course, she's the girl with ancient name, and she has married, by the end of the movie, Colwyn. We will assume she will have a child, and it will be male, and it will conquer the galaxy. Okay, so we're just going to assume from what we're given at the end of the movie that the prophecy will be completely fulfilled. But is that a good thing? Yeah, they seem pretty benevolent, and I think they'll do a decent job of ruling Krull. However, their son conquering the galaxy?
Well, the exact ruling was he would rule the galaxy rather than conquer it.
Okay, so even if you go with rule...
It still means
Yeah. It could not be a good thing. This could all come out to the two of them having a beast as a child.
Hey, appropriately enough with Francesca Annis, it could be the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yes. So it's possible that older Lissa, the widow of the web, stopped the prophecy because she didn't want to have a monster of a child. And I know she says she couldn't kill Ynir, so her rage had to come out on something else. But that's really weak.
Well, I'll throw you a counter in there. Maybe they never did actually get married, and while Ynir says that he had to leave because there were responsibilities, it was more that he was fleeing the idea that he would have to be the ruler of Krull.
That's possible, too.
And by doing that, invalidated the prophecy, and therefore killing the child. She wasn't actually killing the future ruler of the galaxy, but this child who would never, unfortunately, become that.
Well, they actually, in the prophecy, they don't even mention that they get married. She just says chooses her king. And I'm assuming because they love each other and they're going to have a baby and, she's choosing her king.
Well, but the beast seems to be hung up on the idea of marriage, so...
But it's not marriage.
That's true. It's
the choosing. Lissa has to choose who she's with, and she wasn't choosing the beast.
True, but I think if she's to be queen and the other one's to be king, there would have to be a marriage involved.
Yes. But that's very technical.
Well, it's a prophecy. Who knows how technical it's supposed to be?
Well, that's the problem, is that it's a prophecy.
And it's not even one with the chosen one. It's, you're the one chosen to marry this guy or that guy.
Oh, God. We haven't even gotten into the agency part of this yet. But the idea that this prophecy could have happened, or the almost prophecy, what I think is that the other Alyssa and Ynir, in their failure to fulfill the prophecy, made it possible for the prophecy to be fulfilled. Both of them.
An interesting idea.
He comes down from the mountain when the beast comes. She supplies the location when they need it.
It could also be because they didn't fulfill the prophecy. That's part of the reason why Ynir is so intent on helping them, too. To make up for that.
Exactly.
And by not fulfilling it, allowed the beast to come in and attack the planet.
Yes.
I gotta think that the two of them sharing a name has to at least encompass that to some degree. It can't be a coincidence. But
it's absolutely not a coincidence. It's obnoxious. If they're not going to spell out why they have the same name, or why it's important they have the same name, because they didn't have to. There was nothing in the script. There's one line in the script that could have been changed, and they did not need to have the same name if there was no actual connection between them. But there was a connection between them. The prophecy connected them. The failure to fulfill the prophecy and the succeeding in fulfilling the prophecy. So yeah, I mean, that even gives motivation for Ynir, because he just comes down from the mountain. Mm-hmm. He knows the prophecy. How does he know the prophecy?
It is given to him to know it.
It was given to him to know it because somebody probably told him. Somebody else, a mentor in his youth.
Or it could be the Emerald Seer, or since...
yes, that's actually what I was thinking.
Or since Lyssa herself, we see, has that ability. Maybe
does.
She's the one who told him.
That was a part that confused me a little bit, because her sight, it wasn't explained. It just was. When we first hear about the Widow of the Web, I was led to think that she had this power of seeing because she lived in the web. But when we get there, she doesn't. It's something within herself. And it's also something that Ynir has to an extent. He sees what is happening. It's not necessarily that he can see the way the seer sees or the way the Widow of the Web sees. He is able to see that the prophecy is in line to... It's more of a physical seeing than a metaphysical seeing.
Maybe he got the wedding invitation for Colin and Lyssa's wedding and went, oh, I better get down there.
She's got the same name.
Oh, that's what we needed. Him showing up at the castle afterwards and burnt out with, like, the wedding gift and in his tux, like, oh, I am too late.
Took a long time to get down from that granite mountain.
It did. Oh, he's an old guy, yeah.
But at the very end, and I don't know how much you want to talk about the very, very end yet, but it loops in just a little bit. The castle is destroyed when the beast is destroyed. The castle goes up in the air into space. This makes me think that the castle is the one with the power and not the beast itself, because the castle is still... It does not obey the laws of gravity. When it's destroyed, it goes back into space. Who knows if it goes to, say, another planet that's nearby, like the one where the Cyclops was from, and creates another beast. Is it... No.
Well, no,
stay with me.
I have a more cynical view on it.
Let's say that the castle landed on the planet where the Cyclops lived, stumbled upon by a golem-type figure who's then seduced by the power of the castle and is transformed over time to be a beast. The power that this one Cyclops had, which is not a Cyclops at this point, just some dude from a different planet, he is the one who makes the deal. And that's how he decides to reward the rest of the people on his planet. Oh, you want foresight? You want some of this power? Well, the power I'm giving you is a double-edged sword. So, I mean, because it is so, that quote-unquote gift is oh, terrible. It just seems like it would be somebody who is acquainted with the people for longer than the Beast would have been, because the Beast would have just outright killed them. Like, the Beast as we meet him in this movie. So yeah, I think that the Cyclops character had a duty in his mind to also confront the Beast, knowing the Beast came from his planet.
I was thinking the fortress kind of flying up in the air was probably flying off to the grand destination of setting up a sequel that unfortunately would never come with this one.
Yes. Perhaps when we get to learn where the Beast came from.
The Beast's return in Krull 2. Really quickly, let's go over a little bit of the crew for the movie. The director was Peter Yates, who also directed the Steve McQueen cop thriller Bullet, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, The Deep, Breaking Away, The Dresser, and Roommates. This was actually his only sci-fi fantasy film.
Not surprising.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like he totally has the kind of usual vibe for the genre that other directors have. The screenwriter was Stanford Sherman. He used to write for the Batman and Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV series. And this is the funny one. He wrote The Ice Pirates. I remember we were watching this before, and you said, this feels kind of like The Ice Pirates.
It feels exactly like The Ice Pirates, although now that we're unpacking the entire film, it may as well be every single hero genre out there.
Yeah, it's got a lot of the Joseph Campbell Hero of 1,000 franchise.
Yes, it does.
Kind of
Colwyn just screams, the hero's journey.
The music score for the movie is by James Horner, who unfortunately gets a lot of criticism for reusing themes and arrangements in other movies. And to be fair, in this one you can hear a lot of his scores from Star Trek II and Something Wicked This Way Comes. Willow, yep, in several scenes. That said, though, I love his main theme for this movie. I mean, talk about something that really gets you in the mood for it.
It's goofy. It's goofy in the way that you know what kind of movie to expect, and they do deliver on it.
You've got the choir, which kind of gives it this weird, otherworldly sound. You have the medieval-sounding horns, and then it just, drops into this big, swashbuckling main theme that, as you noted, kind of gets used a lot in scenes where it doesn't totally fit. But I love that it just says, here, we're going to have a light, goofy adventure.
Yes.
Jump on board.
Don't take this film too seriously.
And for special effects, the makeup was by Nick Maley, who had a whole lot of stuff to do here with the Slayers and especially the Cyclops. In fact, Breslaw credited his performance. He said it was only a half performance from him, the other half from Maley. And the model effects were by Derek Mettings, who would go on to do the Superman movies and a lot of the James Bond movies. And his model work, for the most part, just really holds up over time.
I agree. Sometimes the closer you get to the models, and it wasn't very often, but it was a little jarring. You could tell it was a model. There's this one scene where, I don't remember who it was riding up to the castle, and just about a second before the scene cuts, it's obvious that he is riding up to a model, and he might be smashing into it any second now.
Yeah, that brought to mind Monty Python, the Holy Grail. Camelot! Camelot! It's only a model. Shh!
Exactly.
The Black Fortress scene where it kind of implodes and destroys itself was actually filmed by suspending the model from the ceiling on this little set of the valley and just allowing the bits of it to fall and filming it in slow motion, which still works pretty well, I thought. It's a nice little moment. Reminded me also of Something Wicked This Way Comes when the carnival gets sucked up into the sky. For some more of the thematic stuff, I thought it was interesting, this sense that Colin and Lissa, as they get together, are kind of this younger generation that's going to change the way things go. Like, we meet both their fathers, and we're told that they were these former enemies who don't really want this alliance, at least don't want it this way. They're kind of stodgy and set in their ways. And there's also the fact that you have this castle full of traditional knights in armor, and the Slayers just mow through these guys. I mean, they can't do anything. And yet Colin puts together this ragtag group of guys who somehow are able to pull off this quest where these trained knights couldn't have. You get the sense that Lissa and Colin are going to put together a kingdom that's a little less traditional than the old way and a little bit less class-based and embrace some newer ideas.
Well, we hope so.
Especially if they're ruling the galaxy, yeah.
Yeah. Thematically, we've talked about Robin Hood. We've talked about Star Wars. Did we get to King Arthur?
Actually, that's what I was going to bring up next. The fact that there is a lot of Arthurian legend in this movie. You get to Colwyn retrieving the glaive. I mean, that's getting Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake right there.
The Lady of the Lava.
The adventures all kind of have elements of the Round Table in there. I mean, hell, you have the guy playing the Gawain part in this movie.
And a lot of what happens is very episodic, so it could be considered very quest-based.
And with Merlin, you almost have him split between three characters. You have Ynir, you have Ergo, who actually does pull off the magic, and even the Seer, I think, has a bit of Merlin as well. And also, going back to the prophecy, there's this sense of the power of bloodlines in trying to secure future power. You have the Beast who wants to marry Lyssa and gain power, and in Arthur, you have Morgan Le Fay, who fathers his son with Arthur, thinking her son is going to be able to rule all over England.
Yes.
And from Arthur, we have to go to the other thing that this clearly takes a lot of influence from, that being Star Wars.
Oh, geez, Star Wars.
There's no way to get around it. I mean,
we could break this entire movie with, oh, that's taken from this. Taken from that in Star Wars.
You have the mission to rescue a princess from the stronghold of this dark enemy who has a legion of identical troops and has mental powers.
Yes, that's just a start.
Cohen is, overeager, and that need to be tempered is very Luke Skywalker, and
he has an old mentor, and old mentors always die.
And the old mentor is even wearing robes that look a little like Obi-Wan's in terms of the color.
But Ynir leads Colwyn to his power, but warns him not to use it until it's necessary. Very, very Star Wars. There's moments that reminded me of passing over Darth Vader's lightsaber to Luke. This is it, but you need to learn how to use it. And the way that Colwyn learns how to use the glaive isn't through practice of the glaive itself, but by becoming much more aware of the world and his place in the world, and by earning the power of the glaive rather than mastery and practice.
And how does he use that glaive?
It's like telekinesis. He just kind of throws it and you think, okay, it's like a boomerang or a frisbee. No, he stretches out his arm like he is searching with his feelings and he is forcing the glaive, which has a whole bunch of little claws on the edge of it, to spin around and around to break through and save the princess.
But even the pose with the arm outstretched,
it's arm outstretched.
Ergo is very fussy, like C-3PO, and then when you get it next to Titch, it's C-3PO and R2-D2 right
Absolutely. You've got a tall, skinny dude, and you've got a short kid.
And of course, Torquil, is, you mentioned the Robin Hood connection, there's Han Solo with his band. I mean, one of them is Chewie. Actually, no, Chewie would be Rel, the big, tall, gentle giant.
Yes.
And all Lyssa needs is the little buns in her hair, and boom.
Well,
there's more than that. Yeah, she's definitely doesn't have.
Leia has agency. Lyssa could be a stuffed animal. It wouldn't matter. Marry this stuffed animal, and you will be king. She literally could have been a stuffed animal. I give you fire. I give you the fire I take from the water and give you power. Her entire arc is... she's stagnant. She doesn't have an arc.
There's also the fact that the Beast and his slayers come from space wasn't something that was in the original script. It was something added later. And
really?
I mean, originally they were just inhabitants of Krull who gained power and were trying to take over.
That would simplify things, but I kind of enjoy that they're from space.
Well, I think that's definitely an element they added in to try and tie into the Star Wars thing. They can say, Krull is a planet, it's space. It's like that thing you liked a couple years ago. Come see this one too.
Yeah.
Thematically, another thread I thought was interesting is this idea of deceptive appearances. That we have both the Beast and his changelings taking on forms to deceive our heroes. We have Rel, who appears to be this towering monster, but is this kind, loyal ally. Ergo appears to be this clumsy fool, but we see that he actually can be a hero and does have some skill. And the criminals themselves are these rough-hewn thieves and bandits, but as it turns out, they're actually very loyal and noble and heroic in moments too.
Colwyn, who initially appears to be a strong fighting man who's confronted with his first real loss, that of his father and the kidnapping of his quote-unquote bride, and he just shatters. He falls to the ground like a child.
There is no time now for grief. You
haven't lost a father and a bride on the same day.
Nor have I become king on that day.
I have no kingdom.
Your kingdom may be greater than you know.
I give it to you, old man, and welcome to it.
I came to find a king. And I find a boy instead.
And he acts much like a child for the first half an hour of the movie after that point. So he isn't what he appears, in both the sense that in the beginning he appeared strong and he wasn't, and to the Beast he seemed weak and he was strong.
And even goes back to the Widow of the Web getting the illusion of her youth and who she used to be for just a moment.
And a lot of transformations, taking on the body of Colwyn, ergo becoming a dog, lots of transformations.
All right, let's move on to a little bit of trivia. The Slayers, that weird distinctive scream they have when they get killed. And actually, before we get into that, I could never figure out what it is with the Slayers. When they get killed, the little wormy things come out of the head and dives into the ground. And
that was Aliens.
Yeah.
Like, if we want to add another layer to this, that was Aliens.
And I noticed, though, that it must have been an expensive effect and one that didn't quite work, because for a lot of the movie, when the Slayers get killed, it's off-screen, and you just hear the scream, but we don't even actually see them get stabbed or anything.
Yeah.
We're just left to assume, all right, I guess that one's dead, we're moving on.
It's another thing that I wish they'd been able to flesh out somehow.
Yeah.
There are so many really wonderful ideas in this film, and some of them, most of them, don't work fully, and they're not convincing because it doesn't make any sense. And it's not, I mean, we could accept it at face value, but then it doesn't hold up to the kind of critique we're doing right now.
Well, it's just like, if you're going to introduce something weird like that and not explain it, why do it at all? It seems like it's an expensive effect to do. You could just have the animation having them blow up and that's enough. But they do this very deliberately and never explain what it is.
That, and the Beast has basically just come to Krull. I'm assuming that this is the first time any of them have killed the Slayers. No one is shocked by their appearance.
Well, there's only one moment where Robbie Coltrane's character kills one in the swamp and stabs it and just has this expression of, huh, that's interesting, as it's doing its weird worm thing. That's the only time we see anybody kind of shocked by what it's doing. The scream that they make whenever they get killed, that weird piercing scream, actually came from the old Peter Cushing movie At the Earth's Core. It's from one of the creatures there.
Oh.
And it's kind of the monster version of the Wilhelm scream, and that you hear it in tons and tons of movies. I always remember it from American Werewolf in London during the nightmare with the Nazi werewolves. You hear it a bunch of times in that scene. The flame effects for the wedding scene where they're handing off the flame were actually accomplished using mirrors.
Really?
Bouncing off somebody else off screen doing weird things with little flame jets. And you can see at one point where when she picks it up, it kind of breaks apart into all these weird little flames, which I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but it has kind of an interesting look. As we mentioned, this was a very expensive movie at the time. They had 23 sets built. And one of them, the big swamp set, was actually built on the 007 soundstage, the big one at Pinewood Studios. In addition to that, it was filmed in Cortina, Italy, and Lanzarote, Spain, where a lot of the Doctor Who episode Planet of Fire was filmed, which gets those great, weird, volcanic-looking rocks. For getting some reactions for actors when they had to be surprised, Yates was known to actually fire a gun on the set to get that shock look. You can see it when the Beast disrupts the seer's vision and everyone kind of jumps when that hand jumps out of nowhere. Or when the crown pops up in the fortress and startles Lyssa.
You can tell that they threw a lot of money into this. The movie is beautiful. There are some aerial shots of what is obviously not a set. It is gorgeous. Costumes were elaborate, I would say in some instances a little too elaborate. There was attention paid to even the tiniest detail. The designers of this movie did a damn good job.
Yeah, I love the...
Everything was very pretty.
And kind of distinctive. Like, you have the futuristic medieval look for Lyssa's family castle. And the Beast stuff, where his fortress has this very biological look to it. You have the eye, you have...
It's very organic.
Terraces that look like claws.
There's cathedral sections that look like rib cages. There are sections that look like arteries and veins.
I also got a very Giger vibe off it. Off that and also the Slayers. They look like something that H.R. Giger would have designed, which again might be, well, this movie, Alien here, this was very successful. Let's grab a little bit of that, too.
Unfortunately, the studios, they obviously wanted a blockbuster. So they threw as much money at it as they could. I mean, that's an obscene amount of money, especially at the time, to throw at a movie. And it didn't make nearly enough to cover production costs. I don't know if I would blame Krull for the lack of big budget sci-fi fantasy movies in the 80s. I'm talking about big budget. A lot of the really wonderful sci-fi fantasy movies that we both remember from the 80s were pretty low and median budget.
I suppose that's true. I mean, it's one of those things where it never takes one movie to kill off a trend. If something makes money, people try it again and again and again before they get the message. And I think the 80s still had a lot of expensive movies, especially the stuff coming from Disney around that time. They were throwing tons of money trying to figure out some new way to...
That's true. I will give you Disney. They did Flight of the Navigator and...
Return to Oz.
Return to Oz. So it could have been a lot of studios kind of trying to get a Star Wars blockbuster.
Yeah. And it didn't help coming after Return of the Jedi. I assume kids at that time would just go see that again rather than see this one, unfortunately. It's interesting, supposedly this was originally going to be a tie-in with Dungeons & Dragons, the role-playing game, which was really becoming popular right around that time. That it was going to be the Dragons of Krull. But
there were no Dragons of Krull.
Well, they ran out of the budget for them because they were building the sets. TSR, the company that puts out Dungeons & Dragons, has claimed that wasn't the case, but...
I could see how people would try to make that connection if it didn't exist, or I could absolutely see a connection if they even originally intended there to be one. I know that a lot of the D&D storytelling has come back recently, especially in novelizations, so I wonder if somebody will take up that mantle.
Well, one could argue that Lord of the Rings has kind of fulfilled a little bit of that over the past decade.
But it wouldn't be integrated into actual D&D lore.
No, that's true. Although it seems like the kind of direction they're going in is trying to make a World of Warcraft movie first. That seems to be the real focus of it.
That works.
Clydesdale Horses appear as the fire mares, and every time I see that, I can't help but think there was a lost opportunity to do a Budweiser tie-in with this movie. Come on, like Corinne and all the guys on the horses with, like, you know, bottles of Budweiser jumping on, woohoo!
The Clydesdale scene was ridiculous. None of them appeared to know how to ride a horse, and they were just bouncing around, and some of them looked like they were falling off.
Neeson looked like he was going to get launched off in a second.
I love that scene because it's a great idea. You know, these horses that can run 1,000 leagues in a day.
And so fast that flames sprout from their hooves and they fly.
Yes.
It's very poetic, but it does look a little awkward. To film it, I guess they actually had to get these horses into the stage in front of a blue screen and have them running on treadmills. And there's scenes where you have like 2 or 3 of the horses side by side. I just imagine the actors must have been terrified that they're going to get tangled up and fall over. Going back to the Beast, he was supposedly the first completely self-contained animatronic monster. That, I mean, not only did like the radio controls move the jaw and the eyes, but also like the heart and lungs would move. But I have to say, I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot with the way the Beast is shot.
They did something to the film's screen resolution?
Yeah, he's kind of optically scrunched down, which I think they were probably trying to hide the fact that it is a guy in a suit, but it just looks weird. It looks like it doesn't really relate to any of the live action that's going on around it.
No. You know when you see those before and after shots of like this magical diet pill and the person just looks squat and wide, and in the second picture it's the same person but they seem to have grown 3 inches?
Yeah, it looks like they filmed
it's exactly that.
Like they filmed it off a funhouse mirror or something.
Yes.
When you see the glaive embedded in its stomach, you can see that the glaive has normal proportions, so they must have sculptured this little glaive distorted so it would look normal when they filmed it that way. So clearly that wasn't something they added at the last minute. That was a very deliberate choice, but I just think it was kind of a mistake.
It didn't work. No. It didn't work for me at all. I preferred the idea that the Beast was not necessarily a physical form, because it could take other forms, but it had such a wide-reaching influence. It would have worked better if they had just pit Colin against, say, a light, or
even, this is one idea that occurred to me, that the fortress itself is the Beast, considering how much of it looks organic, you know? And this idea, once the Beast dies, to me it looks like the fortress is kind of dying with it. That, I think, would have been a little smoother, yeah.
So you kind of buy into my theory a little bit?
Well, I think that...
Just a little bit?
Maybe a little
Give
bit.
me that, a little bit.
A little bit. It's a possibility, I'll acknowledge that. Let's talk about the, well, admittedly small legacy of the movie. I inspired several video games, including a great arcade cabinet game, which I can never get very far in. It's really tough. And the old game for the Atari 2600, which fits, as you said, the Beast feels like, the big boss battle at the end of a game. That's pretty much what he was there. It also inspired a board game, because everything in the 1980s movie-wise inspired a board game. There was a novelization by Alan Dean Foster, who was pretty much novelizing everything at that point. He also wrote the books for Alien and The Thing, and Marvel Comics did a nice comic adaptation of it. And it won the Worst Picture Award for the Hastings Bad Cinema Society Stinkers Awards.
Oh, I bet I could find a worse movie from that year.
In 1983, I think there's a bunch. But that does lead to the question, what role do you think nostalgia has in the appeal of Krull to people of our generation? I mean, if you showed this to a younger audience, do you think they'd get into it, or would they just laugh at it and think it looks silly?
I don't think they would get into it in the same way. I mean, if we showed it to somebody, because we're both in our mid-30s, so if we showed it to somebody who was, I don't know, 28, 29, there might be some interest in it for the irony of it's so bad it's good. I don't think it quite deserves that, but I don't think it could be taken seriously or really loved. If we showed it to children, on the other hand, they would eat it up, because I really feel as if this movie works for children. It certainly did not work for me as an adult.
Well, yeah, the relationships are kind of a little tougher to swallow when you realize, oh, this person's only just met this person, or they've only been hanging out for 2 days, and yet... Yeah.
So, I would say nostalgia would make parents of our age show this movie to their children, who would then in turn love it. So it may aid in seeing their children love a movie the way they loved it. I don't think it would, nobody's going to go print a t-shirt from Krull and wear it proudly.
I would.
I think I would too, but we're pretty much in the minority there.
Probably. Okay, what's your favorite scene from the movie?
My favorite scene in the movie is when Ergo the Magnificent goes into the brush and transforms into a puppy to fulfill Titch's wish.
If I really had my wish, I'd be sitting on top of a gooseberry pie, as big as a mountain. No, that's a bit greedy. I'll settle for one as big as a house.
I'd wish for a puppy.
Only one puppy? If you're wishing, why not wish for 100?
I only want one.
Well, that's a foolish wish.
That Ergo thought this was the stupidest wish. All Titch wanted was a puppy. And he thought it was stupid, but he did it anyway. And that was just this real, genuine moment of kindness.
I never noticed before that when Titch picks him up, you can see tracks of tears on his face, too, that he's still been crying over what happened. And I love this smile, and Titch knows immediately that, no, it's not just this random puppy. He knows it's Ergo.
He does.
And yet he's willing to play along with it, too. And
it doesn't hurt that it is pretty much the most adorable puppy I've ever seen.
It is a really cute puppy. And
the puppy auditions must have been crazy.
I just love that moment after when they get to the forest and the puppy runs off behind a tree, and Ergo comes back, takes one look at Rel and goes,
I still say it was a foolish wish.
and Rel just has this little cheery smile on his face.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
What was your favorite scene?
Mine would be Rel coming to the rescue, and I'm going to have to specify because he does this a bunch of times in the movie. But when they're kind of pinned down by enemy fire at the fortress, and they're trying to get in there before the sun rises, and the fortress kind of disappears from under their feet, and you just cut to this one lone fire mare coming across the horizon. There's Rel jumping on it, jumps off, runs up to the fortress, and he's climbing up, and the Slayers are shooting at him, and hit him right in the stomach, and he's just like, yeah, whatever, and just keeps going up, like, doesn't even notice it. Unfortunately, it comes right before my least favorite scene, which is Rel getting squashed in the doorway. Cause
that is pretty horrible.
That is tough for me to watch, because, boy, he gets it worse than anybody in this movie. But I just absolutely adore that character. I think that's kind of his great moment, that he's willing to cast aside this idea of dying peacefully of what I assume is old age to die this horrific, violent death.
Why doesn't he come?
It's his time to die.
Well, if he's going to die anyway, why doesn't he come with us?
No, he must stay here and accept his fate. If he opposes it, he'll bring great pain on himself.
I must remain here.
Is it time? You've done enough, bro. Stay here.
Each to his fate.
Each to his fate.
I don't think it was old age. He had to go. He left the group when they got the fire mares because that was his time. And I'm assuming that he would have met something there or an accident. He was definitely going to die there, and that's a very strange place to die of old age.
Well, maybe. I mean, we don't know how old he is either, though.
That's true. There's no external way of telling how old he is.
Whatever way he was going to die there, it would have been a lot less painful than what was
absolutely.
coming for him if he decided to take on the quest. So it again adds to the heroics of what he chose to do. All right, what would you recommend for people who like this one, or for people who didn't quite like this one but might like something similar?
Okay, I'm going to go with the former, Ice Pirates. If you haven't seen Ice Pirates, you need to see Ice Pirates. It is space pirates, ice, for some reason. It's also sort of medieval, but it's also very fantasy sci-fi. It's crazy. I mean, they threw just about everything genre-wise at this story, and it doesn't really work, but it doesn't work in the way that Krull doesn't work. So if you liked Krull, go see Ice Pirates. If you didn't like Krull, but you really want to watch a movie, or one of the many movies that Krull was imitating in one way or another, you should see Excalibur. Because
that was on my list.
It is incredible. Even if you don't really like the King Arthur story, you'll enjoy this one.
I'd go with a movie that came out right around the same time, Dragon Slayer, that just, for me, has a lot of that same vibe of this young hero trying to slay this beast to save this princess, and has that same mix of kind of light fun, but also some dark, grim stuff going on around the sides. The other one I'd say was one that came out later on that decade, Willow. Just that, like this one, it follows a lot of those same hero tropes, but also shares with this one that sense of these great, crazy action set pieces. The fight with the dragon, the big sword fight in the rain at the end, strange stuff like the little brownies chasing them around, the magic duel. Just a lot of great, crazy scenes with special effects you can kind of get into.
Pretty much goes right into the fantasy. It takes the space element right out of it.
It does.
And going along those lines, the other movie I would recommend, just from a fantasy standpoint, is Lady Hawk.
Yeah, that's a good one. And again, you have the kind of romance dashed by some kind of evil spell, or some type of otherworldly evil. It's funny, I was looking up trying to find more sci-fi fantasy mixes. There's not very many, actually.
It is a tough, shaded genre to pull off. In movies, people like their sci-fi, people like their fantasy, but it's like that Reese's Peanut Butter Cup ad. You gotta keep them separate.
Yeah, usually each movie kind of falls one way or the other. I mean, the only other one I could find that was kind of an ideal mix was the Masters of the Universe movie, and much as I have a bit of a fondness for it, it's not really a good movie.
It's a terrible movie.
The only other one I'd throw in is one I kind of recommended this for as an alternate, John Carter, which again has that kind of planetary romance vibe to it. Lots of sword fighting and creatures and swashbuckler style.
So yeah, it's a very difficult, and I don't even think Krull was very successful with that.
Not really. I mean, other than the fact they come from another planet, that's really it for the sci-fi part of it. Yeah, the rest is straight fantasy. And that kind of, we don't need logic, magic fills in all the gaps.
Yes.
There we go. Anything else you'd like to say about Krull? Or?
Nope.
I think that takes care of it for me, too. All right, that ends our conversation, but not the discussion. If you'd like to have your say about Krull or feel that we missed something, check out the comment section of this episode on cinemaspection.blogspot.com and start talking. You can email your comments, complaints, questions, and suggestions to cinemaspection@gmail.com. You can also like our Facebook page, and if you're on iTunes and like what you hear, please subscribe to us, and if you have a moment to spare, leave us a review. We appreciate any feedback you can offer. We'll be back to discuss another movie next time. Until then, remember to keep watching closely. There's more to a movie than just what's on the screen. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.